Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead. And with us today with a longer range weather forecast is agricultural meteorologist Greg Soulje. Welcome, Greg. Great to see you.
Same here, sir. Nice to be with you here on a relatively balmy day's worth of December weather. We've had more winter packed into the past 6 weeks than I think most folks are accustomed to. And even the statisticians have been talking about the degree of 1 foot and foot and a half snows, which are in the process of rapidly melting away across parts of the Corn Belt. But we'll take a look at that, the plains, and everyone else coast to coast here, agriculturally speaking, going forward over the next 30 minutes.
Yeah, and I think we're not even going to have a white Christmas here in northern Illinois, even though we had 17 inches of snow or something here already this winter. I guess it's not even winter, is it?
No, not. It's the 21st at 9:03 in the morning. That would be Sunday. And yeah, they've had about 17 and a half inches, if I'm correct, according to the water survey down at Champaign. And so that is on pace to, if it continues on, that puts that on pace to some of the historic snows back in the late 70s in that particular part of the Corn Belt. But it is what it is, and we'll talk about it here going forward.
And as we talk about it, if anyone has any questions for Greg, feel free to post those there in the chat on your screen or in your social media feed. So, Greg, go ahead, take it away.
Okay, we'll take a look at some of the headlines here as we do each and every Tuesday, most Tuesdays and Fridays, and we'll get into our longer range outlook for the rest of the up and coming wintertime season and a few thoughts on springtime, with at least right now moving quickly into, if not there already, a moderate La Nina across a good part of the hemisphere. And a couple of comments here coming up on South American weather here, both Argentina and Brazil. Anyway, warmth is the story, and the winter wheat getting exposed once again into the northern and central plains, and there's been virtually nothing in snowfall onto the southern reaches, where afternoon readings the next couple of days will teeter-totter back and forth. We're not far from this Arctic air, folks, and it will make an appearance into the upper Midwest and parts of the Great Lakes region, but across the Plain States areas, great for outdoor work. The winter wheat, as Orion Samuelson tends to say, we try to kill it off every year and fail in both departments. In any event, got to keep an eye on fire potential. Looking at some of the plots up across the Dakotas, Nebraska, Wyoming, and with high wind warnings in effect there already, some gusts to 60 and 65 miles per hour outside of the Black Hills, for example. So lots of wind, and that's the eastern flank of some of these atmospheric river weather systems. We'll take a look at that and talk about it into the western highlights and headlines there. So the overwintering winter wheat crop is doing relatively well, all things considered. Still some dryness related and drought related issues in some pockets. We'll take a look at that drought monitor coming on. A big range of temperatures. Get used to this on any given locale across the Corn Belt or any given day in the next 5 to 7. And while I think some of these maps and charts are a little bit out to lunch, they just can't really program no snow on the ground and this kind of milder air working in. And it's no major, by the way, deviation from our long range thinking. We'll take a look at that coming up as well. But temperatures this afternoon from 30 up into the Arrowhead of Minnesota, and that's the only corridor of real wintry weather for now. The readings that'll top 50, or they're already into the 50s around St. Louis and points on south and southwestward. And 40s and 50s under and over bare ground areas. Certainly cannot rule that out going forward here as we approach the Christmas week and Christmas holiday itself, but not long lasting again. In any event, through the southern states, had some frost and freeze all the way down across the at least the central and eastern Gulf Coast areas the past couple of mornings. That has since abated. It stayed away from the key ag areas, particularly central and South Florida, where there's been a nice recovery on dryness and drought down there. And so, as it probably applies to the southern Corn Belt, parts of the Midwest as well, for as long as you don't deal and get into that whole rutting thing, heavier equipment leaving tracks and divots into some of the pasture lands and rangelands, and then you have to keep an eye on that, whether it freezes up or not, and it will with time. Same situation is going on with some outdoor work, farm maintenance equipment, and all that kind of stuff being worked on over the Delta and southeastern states, and some shower activity, which is the northern flank and early flank of what will be a rain system coming through the Corn Belt areas here over the next 12 to 24 hours. 60 to 90 mile per hour winds. You might have seen on some of the more reliable social media posts, LinkedIn as well. The Air Force has sent, and over the past probably 10 days or 2 weeks, those at least the hurricane reconnaissance planes have been moving in and tracking this atmospheric river of weather systems across the Pacific. They do that in the Atlantic, they do it in the Gulf, but this is such a layout and will be a dominant weather player in the probably weeks and months to come. They're actually dropping what we call the radiosondes, those pockets of electronic information packets that will then radio back in pressure, winds, and all that. Helps to go into modeling and all that, and just to see how significant, how dangerous some of these atmospheric weather systems are. They lose their punch once they move east of the continental divide. We at least enjoy that across the heartland. But 60 to 90 mile per hour winds. What is that? Cat 1, Cat 2 hurricane force winds across coastal sections. Saw 55 mile per hour winds up there west of Redding and Red Bluff early this morning in Northern California. And that rain and snow area will be working southward. Problem with this setup is freezing levels are quite high, 7,000 feet. They're normally down to 2,000 or 3,000 on any given winter storm in a normal setup. So you have fairly high snow levels, rain over higher peaks or mid-range peaks, and that runs off, and you get these debris and flooding situations that play out first in the Pacific Northwest. They'll be coming southward into Oregon and California. There ought to be significant drought relief, at least over parts of the Pacific West and Northwest. But in a typical La Nina, this doesn't it's not a long-lasting affair, at least with moisture into California. But enjoy it while you may, but keeping an eye on the flood potential. And then, Sarah, before we get into the satellite pictures here and talk about things across the country, a few thoughts here on Argentina and Brazil. Of course, you and I talk about that.
Yep.
So we have in bullet point, at least a graphic form. Not this today. My apologies on that, but there have been, we think, probably winding down of some significant rains. So the past week to 10 days in Argentina, we think there's going to be in some of the La Pampas areas, Buenos Aires areas of Argentina, probably development or redevelopment of warmer, drier weather in that particular part of South America. Meanwhile, there's been an area up around Paraná, Rio Grande do Sul, where it's been a little bit drier than usual, but there have been some reports, and there are forecasts, by the way, going forward of some organized rains in that particular part in the central and the eastern through southern Brazil, western and northwestern sections, maybe on the outskirts of some of that, but things looking a little more positive in through Brazil. Heat's been a concern. They've been up in some of those southern areas of Brazil, up past the 100-degree mark. But we do have some numbers for you from the government of Argentina. They have, as of December 11th, sunflowers, if you're into that, 97% planted. Cotton, corn, and soybeans, somewhere in the 46 to 58% range. Meanwhile, I believe we had some reports in here from Paraná. Most of the corn crop and bean crop doing relatively well, considering some dryness issues and the rains a little bit laggard, 88% in the good and 10% in the fair categories. So there are some pretty decent expectations of some decent harvest, but we need a little more timely rain for late planted varieties and nothing out of control in that department. So that's the quick summation there on the Argentine and Brazil weather scene to our south.
Well, thanks for that update, and we'll
Sure.
of course be keeping folks up to date as we move through the seasons here. And Friday is going to be when we're going to be reporting on these conditions down in South America.
Exactly. So on to the domestic scene. There's the visible satellite picture, and you can see kind of a very windy weather pattern. This is the winds up aloft, the trough across the Pacific Northwest. Systems dive down the front range of the Rockies. They warm, they dry, and outside of a little disturbed weather, as in we talked about the Western Great Lakes and parts of the Northern Great Lakes region, the only other organized moisture is in through the southern reaches of the Delta and southeastern plains, and some of that cloudiness that you think is cloudiness is actually the lingering snow cover on the ground over parts of the Midwest corn and bean complex. Another perspective, some of the weather making its way through the northeast of New England, a colder weather pattern underway at the current time there. And there are the pressure lines, and you can see how they are packed tightly over the northern and central plains and southwesterly wind flow with high wind warnings across the Dakotas down through Nebraska. And livestock managers, bin and barn operators, boy, you're going to be in for a pretty good blow there. And a change in those northern areas to sharply colder air and then back in the other direction. And so those feedlot lush pasture lands. They're going to be all over creation from some sense of melting snow cover, the lack of snow cover, some rain and mixed moisture on top of it, hard freeze again, and move it back in the other direction. So you'll be quite busy going forward in the foreseeable future. And there is the organized, unsettled weather pattern through Montana, into the Pacific Northwest with a slew of weather systems there. A little bit of a boundary kind of sloped through the Great Lakes areas. The only moisture with that in that northwest wind flow we saw on the satellite picture into the northeast to New England with some scattered rain and snow shower activity there. Snow cover, it is rapidly depleting across areas of the southern Corn Belt. Did snow as far south as eastern Kentucky into West Virginia. That's continuing to melt away. They actually had some readings down close to zero a couple of mornings ago. 15 below, by the way, Sunday morning, pre-dawn hours at Champaign, Illinois. That's what fluffed up 8 inches of snow for you. It will do for you this time of the year, but virtually nothing as you get west and southwest of the Missouri into the central and southern plains. So some of the coldest air is back into some of the more substantially snow-covered areas of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes areas going forward, and those will be wide swings of temperature going forward. High pressure over the Midwest. You can see a little rain breaking out in the southeastern states as we head on through this afternoon and evening time, and a couple of systems wound up pretty good and tight out of southwestern Canada, prairie provinces there, back into Northern California and down around Yellowstone. Again, fairly high snow levels for the time of year, above about 7,000 feet. They ought to be about 2 to 4 this time of the year. So keep an eye on that, on at least the heavy rainfall prospect of it west of the divide. We do see these winds continuing to make their way across the Corn Belt locales. And so if you're braced from and sheltered from the wind and on the proper side of the window pane, like we like to say, it is a delightful afternoon. Ratings are up almost to 40 degrees, a little bit north of 40, north of Indianapolis. And there's the northbound warm front. That'll mean a steadier rise on temperatures for tonight across a wide area of the eastern plains and Corn Belt locales. Then by tomorrow morning, it will be raining. You want the cheap car wash, truck wash to get the salt and grime off of the vehicle the best you can. There is your opportunity. But the wraparound effect, this is what we mean by some of these livestock operations in the southern Canadian prairie, Big Sky, the Dakotas. You go from a few rain showers and temperatures in the 30s and 40s currently with 40-mile-an-hour winds to 50, 60 mile per hour north winds and whiteout and snow east of Bismarck into the Red River Valley of the North into the arrowhead of Minnesota. So pay heed. This will be a sudden plummeting drop on temperatures of some 30 and 40, almost 50 degrees if you take into account some of the nighttime lows. And the rain of tomorrow morning into the eastern Corn Belt shifts over to a few snow flurries on west winds to 30 miles per hour. Falling temperatures, some spots may start in the 40s and low 50s tomorrow morning, fall back into the 30s by evening time, the 20s into the first part of the night, and be down maybe as close as Champaign, Quincy, maybe to Kansas City at 10 to 15 degrees by the time we get to Friday morning with sub-zero wind chill. And that's the oscillation effect and vacillation back and forth of what we'll have to deal with the proximity of Arctic air to the north and this mild, warm ridge of high pressure, a little more typical of summertime that is going to be dominating the southwestern states and southern reaches of the country. So just as quickly as the wind and the cold move into the Corn Belt locales, back into a southeast to south wind, we troop off a little moisture across North Dakota, southern Canadian prairie, but temperatures begin their bounce back west of the Missouri during the day on Friday. Next 48 hours, there may be as much as a quarter to half inch of actual rain. So watch for maybe a little ponding of some of this stuff and stuff that's not completely opened up for drainage purposes, slushing up of a leftover snow cover and snowpack, and another swath of big moisture at more than an inch or two into the Pacific Northwestern areas of Washington State and California. So that's the story. When you get this range of temperatures from readings that are below zero, well below zero at night across parts of, let's say, the Arrowhead, the boundary waters of Minnesota, Northern Lakes region, and you've got daytime readings that'll be pushing into the 70s and 80s over the southwestern states, you get that same temperature spread up aloft. And so jet stream winds blow. They blow pretty vigorously, almost on a west to east orientation. And it just takes a couple little wiggles of the northern branch of that Arctic air to let things let loose, building south and eastward. But in the meantime, all the action is with a wide variance of wind speed, wind direction, and temperatures over the northern and central Corn Belt, northern central plains. Harshest of it all from a livestock perspective is that of the plains, especially those northern areas, heads up tonight and tomorrow morning across North Dakota, the Red River Valley of the North, and points on eastward. Another 5 to 10 inches. You can almost repeat this about every 2 or 3 days. 5 to 10 inch plus water equivalent rainfall or snow across the Pacific Northwest, the Cascades into the northern Sierra, and that wet weather pattern is expected to bring southward significant rain, which is not unusual. La Nina, El Nino, neutral state in this wintertime season. It is the wet and unseasonably I guess, unsettled weather pattern that we deal with across California this time of the year. There is the jet stream pattern. If you were to jump on a plane in Seattle and want to fly to Chicago or New York, you will get there in pretty lickety split time, probably about 20, 30 minutes earlier than you would normally expect on a flight if you can get that tailwind accordingly. Going into it, maybe a different story, but again, it's a west to east orientation. You can see how winds kind of buckle in those Tuesday and Wednesday setups back into significant moisture for the Pacific West. Warmth that high, if you will, over the Rio Grande, developing across Texas and across the Gulf Coast area. So you got frost and freeze 1 week. You've got probably some record-setting warmth along the Gulf Coast and parts of Texas and the lower Mississippi Valley Delta region going forward into early next week. So it's a broad range. And again, some of that milder Pacific air, we're not going to fight it, will make its way into the Corn Belt and the Plain States areas, but it's not the way the winter season goes. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, back into a windy weather pattern. Moisture heads up on some of these cold-soaked, snow-covered grounds of the northern plains, Great Lakes areas. You get some of this overrunning moisture. You tend to come up with freezing rain to start, and you got to keep an eye on those temperatures, especially over these coldest parts of the upper Midwest. But everybody else gets into some rain between Saturday and Sunday. Another bubble cold high builds in through the Great Lakes, the Northeast to New England, and it's another rinse and repeat again, but a little more dislodging between Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of some cold air through the Great Lakes of the northern plains. That may be the mechanism to at least add some snowfall for a white Christmas if you haven't had it already for the Dakotas, maybe the northwestern and northern Corn Belt locales, and it's conceivable maybe as far south as I-80 or 88. There may be a little rain snow mix between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and rains farther to the south. I think some of the 60-degree weather had been kicking around, people slapping model stuff up there. A little overdone, but would rule out maybe something close to 50 in some of these southern plains, eastern plains, and southern Corn Belt locales, and warmer than that on southward. The next 7 days, it's off the scale. What is that? Another 5 to 10 plus inches, as we talked about, northern and central California into the Pacific Northwest. That is a lot of rain, by the way, banked up over the northern and central Rockies and Cascades. And most of the action, again, focused in two areas: organized snows for the southern Canadian Prairie, northern Great Lakes region, organized rains and snow melt, Ohio Valley, and points on southward. And coincidentally, nicely to see, there'll be some additional rainfall in some of the still to do and still to work dry, drought-ridden areas of the southeastern states. From a hazardous weather standpoint, it's that change from rain to snow this afternoon, or tonight, I should say, tomorrow morning into the eastern Dakotas, Minnesota. High wind along the northern and central flank of the divide on eastward, and the big rains moving into the Cascades, SeaTac, Tacoma, southward, Portland, all the way down to the Bay Area of California. Those beige and orange areas are high wind, at least wind advisories, high wind watches, or high wind warnings for said speeds at 60 to 90 miles per hour across some of those mountain passes, and particularly through the northern and central Rockies, and gusts 40 to 60 the northern and central plains. But at least it is a milder feel there in the 50s and 60s currently across Nebraska and Kansas at the current time, but again, blown like gangbusters. Temps for the afternoon hours of today, there you go, pretty much mild, as we just talked about. There is the change to colder weather come Friday. Daytime readings in the teens and 20s over the Great Lakes areas to the Ohio Valley as warmth returns well west of the Missouri. That milder air works back in with 40s and 50s over the Corn Belt locales, and probably some 60s out of the southern plains as we get into the early portion of next week. Overnight readings, not very low until we get to probably Friday morning. That's sub-zero cold all the way to the Twins. At zero cold all the way into northern Iowa, northwest Illinois, and probably some teens into the rest of the Corn Belt locales. But again, just a quick sliver over the course of the weekend over the mainly heavier snow-covered, or will add to snow-cover areas of the upper Midwest and Great Lakes region. And by the time we get to Tuesday of next week, another go of it with most areas of the heartland still above freezing at night. Again, not the way the whole winter season goes. Not even wintertime yet, technically, but we'll talk about what's coming up here shortly. There's the August drought monitor. Yeah, we were in great shape. Still work to do here on last week's drought monitor, especially East Central Illinois, parts of Indiana and Ohio. They're going to fall probably somewhere in the top 10 driest years on record in Champaign County, depending on how rain and the rest of the month of December plays on out. Still some work to do over the southeastern states, but nice to see across the Northeast and New England improvement. And there it is, again, the worst of it through Northwest Ohio, New York, at least to central Indiana and East Central Illinois. Meanwhile, into New York State, improvement there. and into the northeast of New England as of early November. Not much to speak of. Get into early December. Yeah, market improvement in New York State into the northeast of New England with the recent primarily wet weather systems that have moved through that particular part of the country. There was NOAA's outlook as of the end of November. And they've been kind of dead on here with that was generally speaking snow. This was their 90-day outlook that took us and will take us into the end part of February. So still some work to do. And we certainly back that up here when we get into our longer range weather forecast. Keep everyone on an even keel basis. We'll talk about what the feds have to say, then our thinking. And there it is. You can see those red hatched areas building all the way northward into the Gulf of Alaska. And so that dislodges the cold. But for now, there's an equal warming, if you will, a block, if you will, another area of high pressure up aloft, but you have to head into the North Sea and parts of Europe. And so we can, until we can dislodge that, and there are signs that it's beginning to lift on out, there's no real means or mechanisms to get this cold air to return. So we enjoy the balmy weather the next 6 to 10 days. And this will be record-setting warm into cattle country of Texas, the lower Mississippi Valley Delta region, parts of southwestern states. It's great from an outdoor work standpoint, but I've been doing this enough years. I hate to see this because it's sometimes you get these dramatic shifts within a 10-day or 2-week time frame when you got cattle out there, and then it rains, and then it snows, it freezes up, and guess what? The cattle are still out there. And we had losses like that a few years ago, and that's just kind of the worrisome setup when I see this. This is not the way the winter season is going to go, so it gets people into kind of a sense of complacency. But it is what it is, and I wouldn't complain about being in West Texas or New Mexico. They'll be in the 60s, 70s, 80s over the plain states, back into the Southwest as mentioned. And relative to at least the climatological averages, these are generally 5 to 10 degree above average temperatures, some spots almost 15 above average if you take away programmed snow cover into the ground. So pretty mild go of it as well across the plains and Corn Belt locales, and a much quieter weather picture as well. I don't know if Santa will be like it wheels down, I guess, or what have you, but there's nothing going on. If you've got snow on the ground, that's it. It's going away. If you want more snow, you got to be up near the Canadian border or the higher peaks of, let's say, the Wasatch Range, the Central Sierra, and points on northward. It almost walks and talks like an El Nino setup, but it's not. And the dry weather pattern continues over the southeastern part of the country. And again, we're not even in wintertime, and we're dealing with this, and I just kind of I'm not comfortable about how things are going to be playing out. Can't change the weather, but I'm just not comfortable about talking and seeing of this because I think we've got, the other boot and hoof, as we say, is going to drop, and it may drop pretty ferociously. So next 2 weeks, there it is, still a mild setup. The cold air just waiting to come southward. And when it comes southward, it will come southward like some of the cold fronts we'll see in the next couple of days over the northern plains, Great Lakes areas. This abrupt shift of some 30 to 40 degrees in one direction into the colder side of it. And still a pretty quiet weather picture as well across the southern states. The warm air, if you will, is there. It takes us to just about the end part of December. Not completely confident this is the right way to go on some of these forecasts, the Fed outlooks, but it is what it is. And people have been throwing it out there in social media, not to necessarily agree with it. The moisture pattern continues on. More big headlines out there. I'm sure there's cattle operations, a lot of dairy in California. So we'll see what transpires with this stormy weather picture in that particular part of the country. So there is the building block, Sarah, going forward here. And now we'll share our thoughts and at least ideas on how the wintertime and even some springtime thoughts coming up here over the next few minutes.
And let's remind folks, if they have any questions, to go ahead and post those at any time. Go ahead, Greg.
All right, here we go. And this is our thinking going forward, and not going to fight it at all. And it lines up, and this is kind of a no-brainer type of forecast rest of the next couple of weeks. Mild Pacific air, much of the country. This is Weather Forecasting 101, and it is what it is. But temperatures will vary greatly into those boundary water areas, northern Great Lakes region. And it's a pretty quiet weather picture as well. So if you still have, opportunity or need to cross T's, dot I's on the last of any outdoor work for the fall season, maybe there's harvest to do. You got to keep an eye on melting snow on muddy grounds. There won't be much frost going back into them, but here's your opportunity. A little more wet weather in the southeastern states. It's a snow rain mix up through the Sioux, back through the northern parts of the plains and back into the Pacific Northwest. No brainer for the rest of 2025. Going into the first half of January 2026, a little reorganization. We're going to get one lobe to push on through as we begin to relax that block out there in the North Sea, the far North Atlantic, up towards Scotland and the British Isles and points east from there. So there's a tendency to return to and probably settle back to below average readings during the first half of the month of January. It may come through in bits and pieces. It may be pretty abrupt, enough quick turnaround that go back in the other direction. That's why instead of normal, because that's going to be such a misnomer coming off the very cold end of November, beginning part of December. Now we bounce back well above average, put them together. It's a normal month of December. No, it's not. In any event, keep an eye on some of these temperatures for outdoor work and livestock operations, the warm dome, if you will, over the southwestern reaches of the country. There will be some opportunity to get some of these rain to snow or snow to rain mixed systems going through the Midwest, some welcome moisture in the mid-Atlantic and the southeastern states. And I just don't see a complete and total ending. It may ebb and flow. Again, it is the wet and stormy season of the Pacific Northwest, but that continues on into the first half of the month of January. A little more warbling around, dislodging of some of this Arctic air, and it will be a cold and recurring cold that locks into the upper Midwest near the Canadian border. Temps, again, vary, some sense of a boundary that'll be underneath this jet stream pattern would begin to suppress some of the warmth over the southern states and southeastern part of the country. All this does is begin to ramp up the moisture machine as well, and probably a better propensity to begin to lay out organized snows. They will now, again, be returning a little later in the season compared to the early start, but they're there nonetheless over the northern and central plains, Corn Belt locales into the Northeast and New England. And the moisture pattern continues on into the Pacific Northwest. Will be some relaxation, central and southern valleys of California. The first half of February getting pretty tough out there, and it is a moderate La Nina, firmly ensconced, but beginning to get into the back end of this La Nina setup. Still, we're going to compact a lot of wintertime around here into February and March. There is the cold air, the main mother lode through the south central parts of the Canadian Prairie. We get the severe weather season to return over the Gulf Coast, southeastern states. Not unusual there. Organized moisture for the Pacific Northwest probably at some point will begin to eradicate stuff of the drought monitor out in the Pacific Northwest and begin to build southward these rain over to snow and these transition to sharply colder air masses. So I think it is January and February that livestock managers will hopefully use this time in December to get things ready to go. Pretty active storm track when you see it come out of Oklahoma and swing into the Northeast and New England. No early spring. The calendars say meteorological spring should start March 1. Don't think so. Cold air and building snowpack through the upper Midwest Canadian Prairie. Warmth over the southeastern part of the country. A little more northward jog as you would expect for early springtime with the severe weather potential. Southeastern plains into the Tennessee Valley Mid-Atlantic region. This is kind of just really reverting back to classic textbook, a little more normalized spring weather over the middle part of the country, and the moisture opportunities to make further inroads on dryness and drought and bring up some of these stream and river levels. I saw, maybe LinkedIn, someone did a story on the Ohio Valley that levels are not where they need to be still. I guess they're holding up some sense of barge traffic there. And so these light powdery snows certainly don't help in that particular department, but we may be chasing one of these years with snow on the ground and a wet and active springtime season. Late March, the cold air begins to make its move into a little more seasonal, typical setup over the Great Lakes region, the warm ridges over the plain states and southwestern part of the country. This is a little more normalized setup of moisture. Maybe early access to the southeastern fields, certainly on the southern and central plains, some winter wheat emergence getting going there. And the moisture pattern in one form or another continues southern Canadian Prairie and favors the northern and eastern Corn Belt locale. So enjoy the next couple of weeks here, Sarah, and perhaps the very early days of January. The other boot and Norhoof will be dropping across the middle part of the country. But I like it. I enjoy it. But I don't like when it's going to change all at once, and it probably will do so here going forward.
Exactly. But we've got spring ahead. So give us your thoughts on what we can look forward to.
Okay. This, let me qualify it, is the official rough draft of springtime, although it's going to air on the New Year's show on This Week in Agribusiness. By the way, we update these 4-week forecasts on This Week in Agribusiness every week. But here's our thinking on the spring outlook. Some variance of temperatures, kind of a normal setup, really, as we wind out of La Nina. You typically get cold highs over the heavier snowpack and colder Great Lakes waters. think that'll be the story. And from a moisture standpoint, yeah, there's late season snows, the upper Midwest, Pacific Northwest, active weather pattern across the middle part of the country. Don't think there'll be much opportunity for widespread early access out there in the plains or Corn Belt locales. This is almost a classic textbook look at May. Cool highs over the northern Great Lakes region. The heat beginning to build in the western states into the plains and southeastern part of the country. A little northward jog on some of the more organized moisture, favoring again delays probably the northern and eastern Corn Belt. Better opportunities, western and southern areas, back into the plain states as well. Still trending a little dry, drought-ridden, but timely moisture from time to time. So that's a quick thinking that takes us into the early springtime season, Sarah, here from the Weather Office. And there you have it. Some balmy breezes, Santa coming in through maybe with his Bermuda shorts on this year. And that's a
There you go.
thing.
That's a picture.
That's a Finkel thing. Earl Finkel used to say that all the time. In any event, that's what we're thinking from the Weather Office. So sorry we blew the white Christmas, but there'll be plenty of opportunity to make it up in January and for Groundhog's Day going forward in February.
There we go. All right. Well, Greg, I want to thank you so much for the great update. We will touch base with you on Friday and get a little quick update for see if things are still on track or if anything's changing. And of course, another update on South America. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
And we want to thank all of you for joining in as well. And if you'd like to look at back issues of Feedstuffs 365, go to feedstuffs.com. Until next time, for Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.